Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of Muslim Skeptic Live. Alhamdulillah, today we have a special guest, Khalid, my wife, who is going to be discussing with me this issue of women working, Muslim women working specifically outside of the home. And Khalid, you've gotten a lot of questions about this issue. I've gotten a lot of questions from both Muslim men and Muslim women who are very concerned about this issue and this question. And there seems to be a conflict between what Islam describes as the role for women, especially wives, as opposed to what the Western paradigm, worldview, whatever you want to call it, determines should be women's roles, men's roles, or any number of genders. Actually, now there's more than two, according to the West. So we want to discuss this in detail and also address these questions specifically. And we'll also be taking a look at the chat, or try our best to be looking at the chat to see if there's any other questions that we can address. So we are praying that this is going to be beneficial, inshallah, and that we address your questions. Okay, so Khalid, you want to take it away?
Okay. Thank you. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Today, inshallah, this topic has been requested very highly, as Daniel said, by lots and lots of sisters, Muslim men and Muslim women, talking about this issue and wanting to address it. So inshallah, that's what we're doing today. So should I jump into the three questions that I've gotten?
Yeah, let's just jump right into it.
Okay, so what I would like to do, inshallah, is read to you guys, I have my notes here, of the three questions that I think kind of embody the biggest kind of confusions and the biggest issues that most Muslim women are struggling with, and the dilemmas that they're facing. So let's go, inshallah, and jump into the first question, and we'll just take it question by question. I'll give my thoughts from the female perspective, and you can do the male perspective, inshallah, and kind of think about it together, inshallah. Okay, so the first question that I've gotten, I'm going to keep these anonymous, but I'm reading like verbatim what different sisters have sent me. So the first question is, how do you stay motivated to be a mom and nothing more? I've always been career oriented. That is how I grew up. And to just be with kids all day and homeschool and think this is my life is driving me mad to the point where I'm actually depressed. How do I cope with it? So that is the question that we will tackle first. What I would like to do I want you guys to think about as we're talking, and as I'm reading these questions out to you, I want you to think about the language used. I've been paying attention to some of the wording that the sisters are using, and wallahi, it's not, it's just to get us thinking about the underlying mentality that we have and the thoughts, the kinds of thoughts, because your words just kind of reflect your thoughts. They mirror what you've got going on internally. And so it's important, I think, to try to catch ourselves as we're saying things, to say, okay, well, these are the thoughts that I have. So some words that kind of jumped out at me, Daniel, is how do I stay motivated to be a mom and nothing more, right? So what does that say? And it's also, and to just be, like the word just, keep in mind when I read these questions, how many times people use the word just, like just a mom, just stay home with kids, or just be home, right? So these are, I think, all important indicators of just the times that we're living in and the way that people think about this. All right, so do you wanna take a stab at this first, or should I? What do you think?
Well, I want to, just before we get into answering the details of that question, just to relay what pretty much all the fatwa say. So we're not trying to give a fatwa here. We're not muftis from our own opinion. The fatwa on this issue all say that as long as, like on the issue of women working specifically in and of itself, is that permissible? And the answer is yes, it is permissible. The only question arises when it comes to the environment in which you're working, right? And if there is something impermissible about the job itself or about the environment at that job, for example, you're in an office and there is going to be a lot of mixing, a lot of flirting between genders, then that is something that you want to avoid. And that applies to both men and women. But when it comes to women's modesty, it's a higher bar because it has to be a real necessity. Whereas men do face real necessities more often because they have more of a financial responsibility. And that's just the way that Allah has created us, and that's what He has legislated and commanded us. So in the case of a man, there might be a situation where he has to be in a less than ideal situation because he literally cannot survive. He can't depend on someone to support him. And then with women, there's just a lower bar because according to the Sharia, she's not necessarily responsible. She has her father, her grandfather, her uncles, her male family members, her brothers that are on the hook, and they're the ones who are responsible for her upkeep. So then if she bypasses that and goes into a less than ideal or perhaps even haram environment, then she will bear more of the sin of that, and it would be haram to do so. So that's the gist of the fatwa. But when it comes to this question, I'll let you start.
Okay. And also one thing, Daniel, that I thought maybe it might be important to add is if a woman bypasses all of these different things voluntarily by, she has her father who could provide for her, or she's actually married, she has a husband whose job it is to provide for her, but if she bypasses it voluntarily, I think that's one scenario. Another scenario that I think is important to also mention is out of actual necessity because of like an incapacitated husband, for example, a husband who can't work, is sick, some sort of illness, or she's widowed or she's divorced, etc., and she's got children to care for, and her male kin is not around or just unable. So there are different scenarios, and we want to acknowledge that the reality that women are facing. Some women, sometimes it's actually out of pure need. It's sheer necessity that she has to work because of all these different things. But sometimes there is not that need. There's not that urgency, and she's just I'm bored at home. I want a job. I don't need a job, but I want one, right? So these are different scenarios too. So basically, let's go back to question 1, which is how do you stay motivated to be a mom and nothing more? And so this hits kind of on a lot of different points, and I'd like to at least get a couple of these points straightened out so we can kind of sort out our thoughts around this issue. The first thing is, obviously, as I said before, note the wording of and nothing more. How do I just be a mom and nothing more? How can I be okay with that? How can I be expected to be content when I'm just a mom and nothing more? So we all know, obviously, this is like beating a dead horse. We all know that today, in the kind of feminist culture that we're living in this consumer society, all of the stuff that we're surrounded by, where motherhood is often dismissed, and it's often devalued, and it's often kind of mocked as this like, oh, that's not a job. Like, what's your real job? You're a mom. That's like, it's like a lack of a job, right? It's like having an empty slot, like a blank, like, right? That's not that motherhood. There's nothing there. It's like an empty blank line. You need to put something there. So I think one thing I think is very important for us women, especially as Muslim women, to deprogram ourselves from is this kind of thinking. We need to really and it's hard. It's really hard work. And I'll be very honest with you guys. I had to do this myself. I had to deprogram myself and kind of unbrainwash myself from the kinds of thoughts that I had, which were this actually. How can I go to college and finish, university and do this and that and not work? Like, that's such a waste. And especially going to like if you go to a name brand university, they call that at Harvard, you're basically a waste of a Harvard seat. And that was a really big slap in the face, isn't it? It's a huge slap in the face. You're wasting all this potential, right? This is potential that you've got that you're wasting. You are literally a waste of a Harvard seat. Someone else could have taken your seat, and they could have done so many more things than you're doing, and they could have done so much for the world and for society. So how dare you not get a job? How dare you just stay home, right? So we have to declutter all of that from our minds. We have to literally take that kind of thinking and dump it out in the trash where it belongs, and reorient ourselves with our understanding of what it means to be a wife and what it means to be a mother. Especially if you're a mother, you have more that you're doing, and you have more like a heavier job, right? And it's a huge ni'mah to be a mother. It's a huge ni'mah to have children and to be blessed by Allah to have children that you're raising. So alhamdulillah, and it's good for us to kind of re-understand it for in a better way. So that's like the first point that I'd like to make, that it's not, we shouldn't think of it as how can I be just a mom and nothing more. It's almost like, try to imagine how it would sound, how absurd and like silly it would sound to our modern ears if I say, how can I just be an engineer and nothing more? Right? Doesn't that sound crazy? How can I just be a university professor and nothing more? Right? We would laugh at that. We would say, what do you mean? Being a university professor is huge. Being an astronaut is huge. Being a whatever, all of these things. Being in the STEM fields is that's not, we wouldn't.
It's huge. I mean, it's a big responsibility.
Right,
it's like
right.
a lot that you are doing.
It's a lot that you're doing, and it's also prestigious, and it's also important. You're doing a lot, and you have a lot of responsibilities, and it's a lot of very important work. So you should be.
In Islam, being a mother is much more prestigious.
Yes.
And being a good wife, being pious, is much more prestigious than being a university professor or muhandis, being an engineer or doctor.
That's what I'm getting at. So that's exactly what I'm trying to say. So if we replace the word mother and put in one of these modern things that in the modernity, the way that we think, the way that we've been like conditioned to think, is these are things that we look up to. These are the aspirations that we have. These are the goals, right? Hashtag goals. So I want to do this. I want to slay. I just want to kill it as an engineer, as a female engineer, right? That's the status that it comes with in our minds. And the word mother, when you take out engineer, just cut and paste and put mother instead, it doesn't work because of the way that we think about it and because of the view that we have of motherhood. So what I'm proposing is we need to go through the very difficult work initially, but it gets easier, inshallah, of deprogramming ourselves from that thinking, purging that kind of, twisted and kind of confused mentality from our thinking, so that we think of motherhood as something, this is, especially for a Muslim woman who's a mom, this is the highest work that you can do. This is much more prestigious and much more important and critical work than, doing any sort of paid work outside the home. You are needed here more than you are needed anywhere else in the world. There's no replacing
you. The question of prestige, though, like if it's just about prestige, isn't it the case that there are many, like the majority of jobs are not prestigious, and even though they're very needed, right? Being a construction worker, being a teacher, being a trash collector, being a custodial staff. These are very important jobs that are very needed. Many kinds of service jobs like this, but they're not prestigious. And no one would say, like, if you say, oh, I'm custodial staff, I'm a janitor, or I'm a construction worker. Oh, what else are you going to do with your life? Like, what are like that would be considered extremely rude and extremely inappropriate, dismissive. Like, these are things that are needed in society, and people fill those roles as is their place, the kind of position that Allah has given them in society. And what I'm seeing a lot of people in the comments are saying right now are that, oh, well, you guys are taking away from the prestige of being a doctor or being an engineer, but when you need a female doctor, or when you need like a female physician, like that's pretty much the go-to example. You want to go to a female doctor, right? So how can you speak against this? So we're going to address that, right? But one quick thing to say that ties into the question is that, well, do we have a holistic view of what is actually needed in society to make society function and for society to run properly? And if we have a good understanding of what is the demand, like what do we need for this ideal society, then we can think more realistically about what people's roles should be and what should be the proportion of roles. If everyone in society is an engineer, that will be a very sick society. If everyone in society is a doctor, that would be a very sick and dysfunctional society. It
would be imbalanced and lopsided.
It would be imbalanced and lopsided. And furthermore, you have a huge demand for, I don't want to say childcare because this is a kind of modern term, but raising children, raising families in terms of tarbiyah, raising strong members of society, keeping a strong family unit that's functional. What about the demand that's required there? And are we filling that demand, or are we messaging or speaking with acknowledgement of this huge, massive need that exists. But in this dysfunctional Western society, and now unfortunately globalized society, we're constantly telling people to get into these careers where they're not serving that demand. Instead, they're serving this kind of corporate capitalist system, trying to raise the GDP of a country, trying to raise the shareholder profits, bottom line. That's what's constantly being messaged to people. So no wonder society is going to suffer. No wonder we're going to see all of these kinds of social problems, family problems, psychological problems, because of this not speaking to what is really the demand, what is really the need.
Yeah, there's an absolutely unmet need in society, as you said, Daniel. I completely agree with that. And then we see the fruits of that in life. We see, people depressed, suicide rates, children who grow up without parents, people who grow up not knowing like basic right and wrong because their parents were both out, and there's a void. So this is what I really want to get to with this question and with other questions, inshallah. And I think this is a recurring theme. There's basically a void that is created when we mess the roles, when we start tampering with the roles that were assigned divinely by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to mothers and fathers, to men and women, but specifically in the family context to wives and husbands, mothers and fathers, right? So there are specific rules. It's not a free-for-all. You can just do whatever you want. A husband can stay home and a wife can leave the house and work, and that's just dandy, right? Like, there are specific rules. There are responsibilities that the husband is on the hook for. That is his job. It doesn't matter how he feels today. He has to go to work. He has to make money. That is his job before Allah. He's responsible for that, right? كلكم راع, right? So this idea, وكل راع مسؤول عن رعيته. Each of you is a shepherd, and each shepherd is going to be mas'ul. It means responsible, also asked about. You will be held accountable for and asked about رعيته, your flock, right? So the man is a shepherd, also the woman is, and we each have assigned roles that were assigned to us, and barring of course unusual circumstances and extenuating circumstances, this is what your job is, right? So but the West makes it into kind of this like blank check, free for all. Oh, you do whatever you want, honey. As a woman, you can just get a job. You don't need to worry about your husband or your kids. Like, that's like secondary. It's also his kids, right? No, but in Islam, we have a very different mentality, and we want to bring that back, inshallah, with strength and with love in our hearts for that. We don't want to be kind of burdened mentally and psychologically and say, okay, well, I'm staying home, I guess, because I'm a mother, and I guess I'm going to raise these kids, but I hate every minute of it, right? And I think some of us are feeling this way because of the cultural conditioning and everything that we're drowning in, that we're surrounded by in this modern life, right? So I just want to say that, so when we mess with these kind of rules for the husband and the wife, the mother and the father, then slowly things start to break down, and we see that, we can feel it. There's a lot of tension, problems begin to happen, and just things get really dysfunctional. So if the father is going to work, someone needs to do equally important work inside the home. If the father leaves the home to bring money in and be the breadwinner, and that's his primary job, protecting and providing. Those are the main things. And then leading the family. He is in charge. He's the leader. And then the wife, it's not that she doesn't have a job. I think we just think, well, I need to be a leader too, and I need to protect and provide. No, sweetie, that's not your job. Your job is to stay home and hold down the fort. He has a role to play as your husband, and he's inshallah gonna do it to the best of his ability. And you have your own role to play, and you do it to the best of your ability. And your job is to support him in the best way that you can, right? And to raise your children, any children that Allah blesses you with, and to hold down the fort at home and make it a loving, warm, comfortable, pleasant environment for everybody. You bring in that beauty. You bring in that nurturing love, that care, that those touches, those feminine touches that men don't have, right? So it's not that you don't have a job. It's not that he has a job and you just don't. You just sit on the couch, or you're the slave, you're the maid, right? No, you have a job, and I think we totally ignore it. We totally miss it because it's not corporate, and it's not you're not smashing the glass ceiling, so it doesn't count, right?
So how can you even compare you use the word job, right? Yeah. For both.
Yes.
Like, if you're making PowerPoints in a corporate office, that's a job, and then being a mother is a job. Is that really not appropriate, but is that an adequate or
No,
apt word.
I see what you're saying. No, I get that. All right, nice catch. But I think so. It's not a job, right? So I think it's being at home and being that it's kind of like person who's kind of the glue that holds the family together, raises children, just nurtures. You nurture not just your children, you nurture your husband, you nurture yourself. Like you're just this nurture, right? And it's this intangible thing, and it's not a job. It's not the same as making a PowerPoint presentation and or working on a project or hitting up this huge thing at work, right? It's not the same, because at the end of the day, that's not your purpose. Like you're doing that, to get a paycheck or to get your career started or whatever. But being at home is a very, very different mentality. But I think sadly, Daniel, people want the former and not the latter. People want a job, they want to do. And also what I was going to say, being at work and getting that paycheck from your employer, that's not your passion. But unfortunately, especially for women, we often think, this is what I find, Allahu Alam, I'm not saying every woman thinks this way, but from what I can see, women tend to think, the way that we're raised or the way that it's kind of explained to us, is that getting a job, like I want my job to be my passion. My job gives me purpose. My job gives me drive, and it's like the reason that I get up in the morning. So we're tied up in our job, whereas men typically do not have these kinds of feelings. And I'll tell you actually a very, literally this happened maybe 10, 11 years ago, Daniel. We had just gotten married. I guess it could be 12 years ago. So we got married. This is a long time ago, but I still remember it because it was such a telling moment for me. It was like a huge light bulb moment, and I was shocked. So I told you, Daniel was doing his master's, kind of almost finishing that up and looking for a job, like his first like real job or his first like big serious job.
I had plenty of real jobs.
I know. But this is your first full-time job, right? Sure. So after the master's, right? So he's looking for his job, and I say something that I think like everyone would agree with. I thought, oh, this is how everyone thinks. I didn't know how men thought, right? So I said, I hope you find a job that you love and that like speaks to your soul and that you're super passionate about. I want that for you, right? Because that's what I want for me. So I thought everybody thinks this way, men and women. And I remember your reply like stunned me, and I still remember it. You said, it just needs to pay the bills. That's it. I don't want a job that speaks to my soul. Like it doesn't have to do, like there's not that high of a bar. I don't need it to speak to my soul. I don't need it to be my passion or my purpose. I just need it to pay the bills. I'm happy with that. That's a job I will take.
If I wait to find a job that speaks to my soul, then we're going to not be able to pay rent and we're going to be homeless. Right. That's the bottom line.
Yeah. So men have this like, they are responsible before Allah to do certain things. It's not a luxury for them. The job is not, this is my purpose and it just drives me and I care so much about it so deeply on a personal level.
But it's coming from a very bourgeois perspective, right? That a job is supposed to be something that is so fulfilling to you. Mm-hmm. And, we can call this like a careerist delusion. Or if you want to like be Marxist about it, you can talk about like a bourgeois fantasy. But basically this idea that the people who are in the workplace are just having the times of their lives, like they're so fulfilled, they're really, making their dreams come true. What is the reality actually? Like you don't even have to be very philosophical about it. Like most of the people that I know who are working, they hate their jobs oftentimes. They're just looking for finishing the week, getting to the weekend, and it's just a complete chore. They hate the people that they work with, or they hate their boss. It's just a grind, dragging yourself out of bed. So there are exceptions to that, of course, but we can't really make rules, or we can't have these kinds of values based on the exceptions. Our values and the principles by which we live our lives and how we teach, if we're in a position to teach and educate others, has to be based on what is the generality. And the generality of work is that it's a slog. It's a responsibility. It's something that you have to get done to make ends meet. So I always find it, and we should emphasize that you were part of this mindset yourself that you're speaking against, and you were at Harvard and you had this kind of, I want to save the world.
I was going to gloss over all that, but thank you.
I'm a Muslima, hijabi, and I'm going to break all the stereotypes, and I'm going to change the world. And so that was your mindset. And what I pointed out when I was trying to propose to you and your family was that, look, this is you're suffering from a kind of careerist delusion. This is a kind of delusion where you think that you're going to be so happy going into this 9 to 5 job. And, I have members of my family who became single mothers, and they had to work to make ends meet. They weren't happy. They were suffering as single moms. The media and culture and music and movies say that, no, you're a strong, independent woman. You can make it on your own.
You don't need a man.
You need no man. You need no man. Then life comes at you fast, right? Then you realize that it's not this beautiful, wonderful thing. If only I could be a housewife, or if only I could be taken care of, if only I can be. And that's human nature. That's the nature of women. And the nature of a man is, look, I'm going to suffer in this job, but like physically it's not a walk in the park. Mentally, it's not a walk in the park, but there's a spiritual side to it, or a satisfaction that I'm providing for my wife. I'm providing for my family, and that is what I need to do. That is who I am as a man. Mm-hmm. That comes naturally. That comes naturally. So I can bear that burden, and men can bear that burden. Whereas women, you find that oftentimes they can be very competent and overachievers in their job, more capable than men, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about what is one's nature suitable for, and going against one's nature is going to have a high cost.
It makes you miserable. It makes you absolutely miserable to go against.
Especially like this modern careerist paradigm. And people want to talk about, Khadija radiallahu anha, she was a businesswoman. So this is something very completely different than being in the corporate world. Like, someone can be at home in the context of one's family, in completely abiding by hijab, completely abiding by modesty guidelines in Islam, and still be a businesswoman. Have, especially with technology now online, you can do many things to make money online. But that's very different than telling women that you have to go into the corporate world, or you have to go and have a certain kind of career.
And without that, you are a failure. You don't count. You don't count as a person. Yep. You count as like a defeated, oppressed, like backwards person, right? Who's being oppressed by her husband or her father. Take your pick, right? That's what we have to fight. We have to fight against that. That is not true. That is not our narrative, and we refuse to submit to it. We refuse to play by those rules, and we're not gonna engage in that game, right? So that's like very, very important, and we could talk about this all day. But so I want to get to the next thing. So then let's see. I just want to make sure I hit on all the points that I was hoping to cover with this question, because we have other questions. So she says, nothing more. So this nothing more part, we want to get rid of that. And then I've always been career oriented, and this goes back to the way that women have been kind of conditioned, and sometimes it's by well-meaning people, even by your parents. Your parents want to see you do well, and they can encourage you to they have good intentions, but they misguidedly may encourage, you need to be educated, and education is very, very important, and you need to be successful in life, meaning highly educated and multiple PhDs, etc. And so you have to work to undo that. If you had a childhood or an adolescence and a growing up experience where you dealt with that as a young girl growing up into a woman, now as a wife and a mom, try to get rid of that and chip away at that slowly. Inshallah, it works. I had to do that, as Daniel alluded to. That was me. I was valedictorian in high school. Alhamdulillah, I was just a nerd. I loved studying. I loved books. I did well, alhamdulillah, in school. And then I went to Harvard, alhamdulillah, where they brainwash you even more into just that liberal arts kind of feel, like, for women, like, you need to do well, you need to really go out there and show the world what you can do. Like, you have so much potential now. You're like this loaded like missile. You need to just fly off into space now. And then after graduation, I was like really sad. I got like really depressed. Do you remember? Because I got married. I got married in my senior year of college, and then I graduated, and then we were living together as a married couple. And then other girls who graduated with me, they were, in Harvard Medical School, Harvard Law School, just different, one was in Wall Street, and here I was, and we would get together every now and then, and they would say, we would check in with each other and have these social gatherings, and then, oh, how was med school? How was law school? How was Wall Street? And then there was me, just married, just home, that I felt very awkward, and I felt like such a waste of a Harvard seat, really. And we were all Muslim. We were all Muslim girls, and that's how I felt. So I suffered from that careerist delusion, and Daniel had to talk me down from all my anxieties and all my fears, and I slowly began to recognize. First, you can't work through any anxieties or any confusions if you can't see that you have them, if you can't recognize what they are. So you got to recognize them first and figure out what your priorities are. I had to do that, and that really helped me. You have to figure out what is the most important thing for me. What's the most important thing as a Muslim and as a human being? Is it money and job and work? Is that my status and my worth are determined by if I work on Wall Street or if I'm in medical school? Is that what I want, right? Does that make sense to me? Or is it by the kinds of relationships I have and the kinds of, the kind of family I raise, and having children and raising them and raising good Muslims, raising the next generation of Muslims, inshallah, in my capacity, what makes the most sense, right? And we have to get that straight in your mind, what your priorities are. And then, things follow from there. But it takes a long time to rid yourself of these delusions, because they have been building up for a long time, very slowly, very incrementally. You go through from kindergarten all the way to senior year of college. And then if you go to get higher education, this stuff, it's just coming at you, right? From every direction, TV, movies, books, everywhere. Your parents, everyone is telling you that. So for a woman, it's not easy to brainwash yourself or deprogram yourself, but you really have to put in that work. May Allah make it easy for all of us. And every now and then, it's perfect, full honesty, I sometimes every now and then something will happen, and I'll also be like, oh, I need to do something else, or this is
the expression. I really hate this expression about you haven't really reached your potential. What do you mean the potential? Here is a glass, and if you're a wife, then you have all of this amazing things that you could be doing, and you're not doing that. So the expression "you're wasting your potential" is such a loaded and delusional, and it's coming from this privileged bourgeois background, and you see some of these feminists who they are in college on the dime of their fathers. Their rich fathers are putting them through college, and they've been fed with a silver spoon their entire lives, and finding a job is it's a hobby for them. Right? This is a hobby. This is something that they want to feel fulfilled because they're bored, as you were mentioning. And they are falling into this kind of bourgeois mentality of a career and so forth. So I would say that priorities are important, as you mentioned, but we also, now let's talk about some of the costs. What is the cost of a career? Because anytime you make a decision about what you want to pursue in life, you have to weigh the pros and cons. And often, because of this careerist delusion, the cost of a career aren't really discussed. And we mentioned some of them, often for the vast majority of people's jobs, it's not a pleasant experience. It's highly stressful, and people do it because they have to. They have no other choice. And if you have no other choice in doing something, then it's not really consensual, right? It's not really voluntary. You have to. So how can you consider something that is obligatory and non-consensual as something that fulfills your dream? For the vast majority of people, that is not the case. And for feminists who are promoting this kind of mentality, I would just say that you are just playing into a very privileged bourgeois mentality that is completely divorced from the vast majority of human experience. That's the first thing to say. But specifically with women, and you talk about some of this in your classes for Alesna, like your Match Made in Jannah class or course, where women have a certain pressure because of sheer biology, right? There's a fertility window. There's only a certain window within your life where you can have children and basically be able to raise them, have the energy to keep up with them. And that is something that you have to put aside if you pursue a career. Much of your fertility window as a woman will be spent on education. Okay, when we say education, what do we mean? Because most of the education that people get is vocational, right? And this is what I will explain to people when I talk about this issue, is that education has two basic components within the university, especially. You have the vocational components of your education. So if you're going to be a lawyer, you need to know certain things to be a lawyer. If you're going to be a doctor, you need to know certain things. If you're going to be an engineer, if you're going to be a mechanic, you need to know certain things to be a mechanic. So that's one aspect of education. Then the other aspect of education is just cultural or artistic. You know, what does it mean to be a cultured person? Like, have you read the classics? Have you familiarized yourselves with the great works of art and literature and music? Yeah, and these kinds of things. That's another component of education, especially in the liberal arts context. But when we're talking about career, if you are planning to go into this kind of careerist life, then that requires getting that vocational training. That takes time. That takes a lot of time. That's the bulk of what a university education is supposed to be about, to prepare you to be a cog in this larger machine, this larger capitalist consumerist machine. So you're going to spend, as a woman, many years of your life getting that education, maybe even specializing, getting a master's and a PhD. And then you want to start looking to get married after that. So what, you're going to be 24, 25, 26 to just begin. And then it might take a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years or longer to find someone. So you've really paid a huge price in terms of marriage, because then when you get married at 31 or 30, you're going to be very limited in how many children you can have. Maybe you won't be able to have any children, maybe one or two. And the energy that you can spend, because you, as you're going to get into, like you mentioned already, how can you really spend time with your children? You have to put them in daycare. You have to allow strangers to educate and to raise your children, because you are maintaining this career that you spent 4 years, much more than 4 years, because you have to count grade school as well. You've spent decades of your life, and now you want to leave it for children. So this is like a multifaceted problem, and the educational system is a part of this whole equation. But basically, you've paid all of that, and then what is it? That cost that you're bearing, is it really worth it? And there are so many articles from women who will say that, look, now I'm on my deathbed, or I'm in my 60s, and it wasn't worth it. Wasn't worth it because now I have nothing that matters to me. Like I'm not really reliving my glory days of those PowerPoint presentations in Fortune 500 companies. I'm really not reliving that. I'm looking at other women who didn't choose that path, and they didn't go into the corporate world. They didn't dedicate themselves to a career, and now they're enjoying being grandparents. Right? They're enjoying their children, their grandchildren, their husbands. I, on the other hand, I paid the price. I paid the price of all of that for the sake of what I thought would fulfill me, what I thought would bring me a deep happiness and sense of fulfillment, and it didn't actually achieve that. And that makes sense. That makes complete sense. Why would being a corporate slave or being in these kinds of roles, if you're lucky enough to be in a white collar job and be a corporate slave, which the vast majority of people cannot be in that kind of position. But even if you're lucky enough to be, going 9 to 5 and getting on those conference calls at 8 a.m. or whatever, if you're lucky enough to be in that position, why would that give you any fulfillment? Like, why would that really speak to your soul? It's only this kind of false consciousness that's been created by feminism and by capitalism, by this capitalist mindset. And we're not Marxists, okay? Marxism has its own issues and problems. We're not socialists. We're not communists. But the reality of the capitalist system is something that any Muslim should be able to recognize, and the kind of false consciousness and psychological manipulation that happens because of this kind of mentality, this careerist delusion.
So I want to take this juncture to ask you guys, how many have you heard of this book, Lean In? It's a pretty famous book. It got like lots of like high reviews. It's like #1 national bestseller on Amazon and different websites. So I got this book out of like just sheer curiosity to see what this woman says. Sheryl Sandberg from Facebook, Google, she's like a big deal, right? She's like this huge feminist. So let's see what Sheryl Sandberg has to say. So I'm quoting on page 14. I'm just going to quote a short excerpt for you guys. And it hits on a lot of the points that you just mentioned, Daniel. So, quote, Judith Rodin, president of the Rockefeller Foundation and the first woman to serve as president of an Ivy League university, once remarked to an audience of women my age, "My generation fought so hard to give all of you choices. We believe in choices. But choosing to leave the workforce was not the choice we thought so many of you would make." So what happened? My generation was raised, now this is Sheryl speaking, my generation was raised in an era of increasing equality, a trend we thought would continue. In retrospect, we were naive and idealistic. Integrating professional and personal aspirations proved far more challenging than we had imagined. During the same years that our careers demanded maximum time investment, our biology demanded that we have children. Our partners did not share the housework and child rearing, so we found ourselves with 2 full-time jobs. The workplace did not evolve to give us the flexibility we needed to fulfill our responsibilities at home. We anticipated none of this. We were caught by surprise. So I'm gonna spare you the rest of this, but this is what you were talking about, Daniel, this clash between biology and careerism. When just at the time when you need the maximum time investment in your career as a CEO, as a businesswoman, as a doctor, as a lawyer, whatever job you're doing in this white collar career world, at that same time when you really need to be ramping up and you're like competing with your male counterparts, your biology is also kind of like, your clock is ticking, as they say, and it's like nagging you, okay, well, you need to have a baby because time is running out. And so women get caught in this like vice, in this bind, and they don't, and it makes them miserable. It's like you can't exaggerate how much misery that causes women and how much anxiety it gives them, because they can see, it's like when you're on a timer and time's running out, you're in a competition, this is how it feels 24/7. And a woman instinctively kind of knows it. She knows, okay, well, I need to start looking for a husband if I haven't found one already, and I need to, if I'm married, I need to start having babies and having children, because if I haven't done so already. But at the same time, I'm needed at work more than ever, and I have to choose. And what feminism says, this is the big lie, the great deception of feminism, is that you can do both, honey. You can do both. That is a simple lie. That's just falsehood. And a lot of women,
you can
do both well. You can do.
Yeah, you can. You can, but you basically have to not be a human being anymore.
All right. You lose your womanhood. You lose your humanity. You lose your sanity trying to do both. But you won't. You ultimately will fail, I think.
No, because look, technology has facilitated this kind of shift. Like if we get into the history of it, with the rise of capitalism and industrialization, what happened was you had corporations, newly formed corporations at the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries, where you have factories, and factories need workers. They need waged laborers. And if you want to really produce at a maximum and really increase the shareholder profit, you need more wage laborers. And just having the men is not enough. Just bring in women. If you bring in women, then you have more workers, which means you double the workforce, you lower the wages because you have more people competing for the same amount of jobs, and therefore you can produce more profits. And this is really what began this idea of women in the workforce, bringing women into these kinds of careers. And to be able to do that, obviously there was so much pain and suffering. We've heard the stories, or if we've read history, about how terrible the conditions within these kinds of environments, the factories, industrializing, how terrible it actually had been. So you have to have a psychological program as well to condition people to accept this kind of dystopia, to accept their kind of the terrible lot in life that has been created for them by a capitalist system, so that they don't rebel against it, so that they don't rise above it, so that they don't choose the obvious. Like, why would I willingly go into these kinds of jobs when I can home with my children, with my loving family, being in the kind of role that God intended. So you have to have this entire psychological program, and then you also have technological innovation, legal innovation as well. Basically, you want to make it so that it's a very bad idea legally to not go into the workplace. But basically, the technology includes things like formula. Right, having formula for babies, so that you don't need a mother to physically be with her child to nurse the child. You just feed the baby formula. A daycare worker can give the baby formula.
Anyone can do that. The mother is no longer needed. She's no longer indispensable, because you can just replace her milk with formula, and anyone can do that now.
Also, birth control in general. So the birth control pill, this is something that is technological. A woman has to, and what the pill does is it changes your hormones. Changes your hormones so that you can be sexually active, but you don't reproduce. You won't get pregnant. So this makes you a better worker. You don't have to be more efficient, right? You're being turned into a machine. And this also affects men too, right? These kinds of technologies also are turning men into machines. But with women, it's particularly perverse because it also involves children. So all these kinds of technologies have been developed. And you can ask, like, okay, Khalid, you're saying that in the future, women, like a woman who chooses a career and dedicates her life to making PowerPoints or whatever, she's going to then be dissatisfied, or she has this biological need to have children. She feels that. Well, why can't we just invent a pill or some kind of psychological treatment where the woman no longer feels that pain? We can invent, maybe in the future there will be.
Her maternal instincts.
Yeah, you can get rid of her maternal instincts. You can get rid of any kind of depression. Depression is also another thing that is now medicated with technology. Like the natural instinct that a person has to live in this modern dystopia is to be depressed, to be severely depressed. But you can take away that feeling, right, through antidepressants. So just those technologies can advance, those pharmaceuticals can advance, and then no longer do you feel like being a mother, because from a feminist perspective, you should be able to have the choice if you want to be a mother, right? It's kind of unfair for nature to decide that for you. So we have to give you that choice by giving you these drugs, and then you can decide if you want to be a mother or not. And that's what freedom dictates. That's what liberty dictates. We're just expanding your ability to choose. And what could be wrong with that? So these are some of the themes that are discussed in Genius of Islam, the video that we released, where we talk about how technology combined with liberalism and this kind of pursuit of freedom, maximizing freedom, actually enslaves and is not only enslaving human beings, it's actually destroying humanity. It's actually completely corrupting and taking us from a state of being humans to being in a state of something else, or whether you want to call it robots or androids or whatever, just not human.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's yeah, subhanAllah, you said a lot of very, very important things there. And so let's maybe jump to question 2, because we don't want this to.
That was just question 1?
No. That was sabr. We are now hitting question 2. So question 2 is, and these are all somewhat related because they're on the same topic. So question 2 is a mom of 2. She says, I'm a mom of 2 with a bachelor's degree in chemistry. I've always dreamed of being a university lecturer, and now I have the opportunity to study and get a PhD in engineering. On the one hand, I feel like my work can be beneficial for the ummah, but on the other hand, that would also mean my kids would have to go to daycare. So she says, I'm torn between the 2 options, either pursue a degree and career or staying at home. I'm struggling to understand if my positive contribution is important enough to take time away from my kids. These are also considerations that I have to keep in mind. 1, financial contribution to our family, which is needed. 2, I'm able to limit interaction with men because my advisor and my entire team is female. And 3, sustainability. Is it sustainable that all Muslim women note the word all Muslim women just stay home with the kids? Or should they also be in some way involved in the workforce? So that is question number 2. It's kind of a loaded question. It's got a lot of different parts. We'll basically review the facts quickly. She's a mom of 2. She has 2 kids, and they're young because they would have to go to daycare. So meaning they are probably not in elementary school yet. Because that's kind of daycare itself. So they're little kids. She's got 2 of them. She has a BA in chemistry, and she now can do a PhD in engineering. Should she go for it or not? Going for it would mean, in her mind, helping the ummah, positive contribution, etc. Not going for it and electing to stay at home would mean her kids would stay with her. She would raise them. Otherwise, she has to give them up and hand them over to daycare. She's struggling to basically, I'm struggling to figure out whether my positive contribution is important enough to take time away from my children. These are words that I want you guys to make note of. Take time away from my children. Just stay home. Oh, and then I remembered what she said in the very beginning of the message is, I've always dreamed. So note the word dreamed. I've always dreamed of being a university lecturer. So these are the common themes that we're kind of teasing out through these messages to kind of give us an understanding of this is the way that we're thinking. And sometimes it's subconscious. It's totally like not, we're not wanting to think that, but this is how we're thinking. This is what we are unconsciously kind of believing this whole time. So always dreamed of being a university lecturer. So that goes back to the aspirations, right? We talked about how it's prestigious to have certain jobs and hold certain positions. And motherhood is not one of those jobs or positions that is prestigious. That's not one of those things that we aspire to anymore in this modern world, in this dystopian context. So we've already talked about that. So basically you have to fix that idea of, oh, I've always dreamed of this, I've always dreamed of that. And if a woman says like, I've always dreamed of being a mom, she'll be laughed out of the room in most cases. If people are too polite to laugh at her, outwardly, they'll just laugh inside, right? Like, oh, what an idiot. She wanted to be a mom. That's your dream. We have to fix that, right? So that's something we have to kind of deprogram from up here. Just get rid of that. Because dreams, subhanAllah, like you have to have the right priorities and your dreams will be aligned, right? So it's like someone saying, oh, I've always dreamed of being a garbage collector. Like, so we have to, give things their due place and align our aspirations with our values and our morals and our principles in Islam. So I'm not saying, again, like, please don't misunderstand, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it's haram to do this or to do that. Being a university lecturer is bad. So just I want to remind people every now and then so they don't think that, we're saying things we're not. But just be mindful of the things that you're aspiring for, the goals that you have for yourself that you're trying to aim for. Are they worth it? Do they really deserve that status that I've given them?
But people can't determine what's worth it or not unless they have a realistic understanding of what the costs are, right? And if they've been completely brainwashed by this environment and everything that we talked about, then they really can't make an accurate or a informed choice.
Right, and their assessment won't be accurate, right? It won't be right. So basically,
they're going to be rudely surprised, like rudely awakened.
So subhanAllah. So here, what we have to.
Yeah, I think we should just reiterate what we said at the beginning. That some people, they have no choice. Some women, they have no choice because of whatever situation that's been created in the modern world, or because of personal circumstance. They have no choice, but they have to work. We already mentioned that we're not talking about that. And that this question, she does have a choice.
She does have a choice. And she's always dreamed of being this. So here's the opportunity. Should I take it? Right.
Right.
Not because I have to, but it's my dream. It's aspiration. That's why we're addressing.
Yeah. So
that. Maybe
she will do the calculation. And she will do it. She will go pursue her PhD. I'm reiterating what you said, that we're not making a choice, or we're not telling her, no, you have to drop your PhD. You have to. That's not, we already mentioned in terms of the Sharia, what is halal and haram. You have to always keep that in mind. But beyond that, we need to just have a higher understanding and perspective of our reality. And that's the purpose of this entire discussion, is we're talking on that level. And I just see like in the comments people spamming, oh, Khadija radiallahu anha.
Khadija was a CEO. Aisha radiallahu anha was a teacher of. She was a university lecturer herself.
Yeah, she was a university lecturer. Like, look at what about the majority? Even the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the mothers of the believers. Like, most of them were not business women. Most of them were not teachers. Actually, most of them were. So why are we just looking at the exceptions? Like, those might have been exceptions because of very particular circumstances, right? She, Aisha radiallahu anha, and she needed to be teaching because she was one of the most knowledgeable of the Sahaba. So she had that responsibility. So if you are someone, for example, who is just, you have this gift, right? And really, it's the same thing that you'd say to a man. But if you have a gift in medicine, then sure, maybe the benefit really that you will bring to the ummah through practicing medicine for Muslim women is going to be so great. Then yeah, that benefit might be necessary for you to forego getting married,
justify the cost,
or might justify the cost of not having children or having like only one child, maybe, right? But if everyone, okay, regardless, has that in their mind and pursues that, then as we mentioned at the beginning, that is going to create massive chaos, massive imbalance. It's going to lead to a lot of dissatisfaction. All of the women who cannot, for whatever reason, be the university lecturer, the PhD, the professor, the Fortune 500 CEO, right? And think about like all these Muslim, whenever we say Khadija was a Fortune 500 CEO, like that kind of, or she was a businesswoman, that expression. So whoever, Muslim women who are not that, what do they feel? Or they have no chance of getting to that position, right? And I mean, you gave an entire talk about like the entire context of Khadija's radiallahu anha, her like business, and
she was not conducting the business herself. She was not interacting with men, one-on-one. She wasn't going to meetings and heading up like the boardrooms, and she wasn't giving presentations. She had inherited much of her wealth from her previous husbands. She had been married multiple times before her marriage to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that money was hers from it was inherited, right? And then she had different parties managing it for her, and she had different people in her employ, but she wasn't what I think we picture her to be with our feminist lens that we're looking at everything through.
And was she spending as much time on that business after she got married to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after she started having children? No, right? So this is, you want to keep bringing up these Muslim feminists wants to keep mentioning Khadija radiallahu anha, and they should mention her, but mention her accurately.
In the full
context, in full light of what she actually did and what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam approved of. Give the full picture. Don't give this selective feminist nonsense, right? Islam has nothing against women having wealth and women owning wealth, women owning businesses, women owning properties. Like my great grandmother. Was actually very wealthy. She was a landowner in Iran. Okay, we're talking about the early 20th century. Okay, 100 years ago. She had a lot of properties, but she was also very pious Muslimah. She was very practicing Muslimah, living a humble life, but she was owning property. There's no contradiction there, right? There's no contradiction. So we're trying to get to the bigger picture, the bigger ideas, the fuller context, because there's a lot of deprogramming that really needs to be done. Like there is so much deprogramming, and I'm seeing comments and in so many conversations, people have like 2 or 3 lines that they kind of short circuit to, like, oh, but you're not meeting your full potential. Oh, but Khadija was a businesswoman. Oh, but some of these sahabiyat were participating in battle. Like, this is like, or what about physicians? Like, what about female doctors?
Would you want your mother or wife or sister to go to a male doctor?
Yeah, like these kinds of soundbite stereotypical lines that are just rehashed. Coming from feminists, like, you claim to be so enlightened and so intelligent. Okay, let's see some of that instead of the constant lines that you've just memorized and are rehashing over and over again. Let's try to see beyond that and think beyond that.
Yeah, and I think yeah, subhanallah. So let's getting back to this question. Let's talk about some of the costs, as you mentioned, Daniel. Let's have a more sophisticated understanding, a more realistic understanding of the full cost, the full burden that a woman would have to bear to leave young children and kind of put them in daycare, and then go pursue a PhD in engineering or any other sort of career that is like that. So basically, she's talking about the financial contribution to the family. She said these are the considerations that I have to make. What about I'm going to make more money, inshallah, I'm going to help my husband. I think the implication is her husband already has a job and he is working, but they need, like, it would be helpful to have a second income to supplement. So what would you say to that? Do you want to mention the two income trap?
Yeah, so the two income trap, sometimes we're deluded into thinking that, well, costs are so high, we really need two incomes.
Yeah.
And for some families, that is genuinely the case, because the kind of disaster that, especially in 2020 with lockdowns, people are out of work, and you literally will not be able to afford rent, like at a very modest one bedroom apartment, without two incomes. So putting that very real situation aside, let's imagine a situation where there isn't as a dire need. There's this idea that we have to have two incomes, so both husband and wife work. And there was an interesting example, or there was an article that I read several years ago of this couple. Both of them were in technology, living in the Bay Area, working for, I don't know, Facebook and Google, Apple, these kinds of companies. And they felt that they were very poor, even though both of them were making six-digit salaries. We're talking about $150,000 salaries, both of them. So their annual income is $300,000,
Wow.
right? And they felt very poor. They felt very poor. Why? And they were describing this in the article. It's because we're embedded in this kind of Silicon Valley culture and standards of living. We're looking at our peers, like our friends, our coworkers. They have a certain lifestyle, driving a certain car. They're wearing certain kinds of clothes, shopping at certain kinds of department stores. So we were spending all of our money to just be a part of that culture, to keep up with the Joneses. Exactly. So that's is that a situation in which you're in? Could you downgrade? Could you move? Could you find a way to make it work so that you are not sending your children to daycare? And that's really, I think, the biggest cost. And you mentioned many reasons why it's a huge cost, but you are not there to raise your children. Your children are being raised by strangers that you don't really know. You can never really know a person. And, I'm not saying that daycares are abusive. I'm sure most of them are perfectly fine. But we're talking about an overall mentality where the person might not be a criminal who's taking care of your children, but does that person necessarily have the best akhlaq, the best adab, the best spirit, the best spirituality? And is it someone who's better than you as a parent, who's going to love the child more than you, the parent? So do you really want something less than ideal for your child?
I want to jump in here real quick, Daniel. So what you're saying reminds me of something that it's really powerful. When I looked this up and kind of learned about it, it was really helpful for me. So I want to share this bit with you guys. Let me see. All right. So basically, there is something called orientation. So Dr. Gabor Mate talks about this a lot in his book Hold On to Your Kids and other books that he has, but it's really, really interesting. Children need orientation for the first several years of their life. In infancy, all through childhood, they really need orientation, which is basically someone to give them the lay of the land. They need someone to tell them this is right and this is wrong, this is good and this is bad, this is dangerous, this is beautiful, this is ugly, this is good, right? Where they need someone to orient them in the world as soon as they enter this world, enter this dunya. And there is no one better to orient a child better than his mother or his father. That is the best orientation kind of force. And the parent has that responsibility. And also the parent is equipped in the best way. The parent is beautifully suited for the job. subhanallah. So the parents are really, really necessary, and I think sometimes we don't fully understand that. We don't fully understand the critical importance of our role as parents, but especially as mothers. This is something that I want to kind of say to my sisters, right? Fellow moms, I think you sometimes kind of get lost in the drudgery, as you kind of call it, and I totally feel you. I totally get it, because I kind of feel the same sometimes when I'm cooking or cleaning and I've cleaned something and the kids like went 1 second later and like messed it all up. I just feel like, oh, what am I, the maid? I have to clean it again. And so I totally understand your frustration, and it can be boring and tedious. But I think when you rise above that and kind of like shift your perspective a little bit, it's very important for you to realize how important you are to your child. You're not replaceable. You're not interchangeable with other people. They're not all going to be like you for your son or for your daughter. There's only one of you. Allah has given you the ni'mah, the gift of your son or your daughter, and Allah has given that child the ni'mah of you as the mother, subhanallah. And the father, same goes for the father, but I think the mother, this is why the hadith, subhanallah, the Prophet ﷺ said, ummuka thumma ummaka thumma ummak, and then he says, thumma abik, right? It's very important to realize your value as a mother. And this is not just, I'm saying this to empower you, to kind of give you, feminists always talk about, oh, empowering, women have to be empowered and stuff. This is empowering. This is the real empowering thing of knowing your value and your worth as a mother, as a right? As a mother in Islam. So there's no replacing you. So if you go out and you leave your children, especially in this critical part of their life, that first several years of life where they really need orientation from you, you can't let someone else orient them, because you don't know how they're going to orient them. You don't know exactly what they're teaching them, even if they're Muslim. But sometimes the daycare is not Muslim, so it's even more, dangerous, right? And the Gabor Mate talks about this, where basically orientation is like the child is almost like a baby duck that needs like a mama duck to imprint on, right? And there's been studies that kind of show that when you take away the mama duck for like a baby duckling, the baby duckling will imprint on the first, like the nearest object, the first object that comes to mind, literally, whether it's like a human being, a mechanical toy, a twig, like a stick, right? Anything. They'll just come across it and say, oh, okay, this is my mama duck. Because if you take away the mama duck, that baby duck is lost, and they will latch onto anything else. So taking it to the human context and our context as Muslim families especially, we don't want our ducklings, right, our little babies, to imprint on anybody other than us, because quite frankly I wouldn't trust anyone to orient my child in the way that I would, not because I'm better than anybody else, but because I'm the mother for this child. I need to raise this child, right? And then the other thing that Gabor Mate talks about, I think we should kind of think about and keep in mind as we're making these decisions and weighing the costs and the benefits of going to work and leaving our children, is this idea called attachment. Children really, really need attachment, as they need orientation. They need to bond with you, right? This is actually one of the main themes of the course that I did at Al-Asna, Bonded Hearts, Noble Minds. If you remember, that was one of the main kind of overarching themes, is orientation and attachment. Children need that from the parents more than anything, right? So you need to bond with your children, and there's no one else who can do that for you. There's no one else that we can bring in to take over that for you. So just keep that in mind, and these are some of the costs. And also, do you want to mention the...
Yeah, I'll mention that, but you keep citing Gabor Mate. Like, are we secularists or are we modernists? Let me give you some Islamic content on this Islamic channel. So we also know as Muslims the importance of sohbah, right? The importance of sohbah, meaning... talk about that in my class. MashaAllah. Sohbah means that companionship. And we also know that knowledge is not something that is this disembodied idea of knowledge, like what you explicitly say or what you explicitly read, right? There's other ways of acquiring knowledge and understanding, and one of the main ways is through sohbah, through your companionship with your teacher. And this is the model of Islamic knowledge, actually. And we see so many statements from ulama and the great scholars of the past that they would say that the main thing that they learn from their teachers, the main thing that they learned is manners, akhlaq, adab. But what does this mean? Because how do you learn, when they say that we learn the akhlaq, what they're saying is that it's not like the teacher said, do this, do that. No, they saw, they experienced, they felt just by being in that person's presence, right? So that has a big effect. Like the deeper point of that is that that presence and that companionship has such a big effect. And that is exactly why the Sahaba were the greatest generation, and they were the most knowledgeable, purely because they were in the presence of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Obviously, they also read and they heard and they got explicit, instruction and teaching in words. But the greatest component was just the barakah and the blessing of being in the presence and the company, and serving the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and dedicating themselves to him. So that's the kind of relationship that we have to model in our lives, right? And every single family, this is the model that you want your children, you want to embody correct adab, correct akhlaq, and these values and principles, these manners, behaviors. You want to adopt that for yourself. But the other secondary benefit of that is that your family will benefit from your presence. But if your children are not in your presence, then what good is that? Right? And you see
they're in someone else's presence.
They're in someone else's presence. So it doesn't matter how, mashallah, you have memorized Quran and you're praying your salat and your sunan and nawafil and you're fasting and you're giving charity. Is that going to benefit your child? No, because he's in school. I mean, that's homeschooling. This is a whole different topic. But even when he's an infant, even when he's a toddler, who is he spending time with? Children at that age from infancy are observing and they're learning and they're orienting, as Khalid said. So are you providing the orientation or someone else? And it's not necessarily, like I said at the beginning, that the person at the daycare is a criminal, or even the person at the daycare might not even be like a fasiq, like just a corrupt, vile person. It might not even be something conscious that the daycare worker or pre-K teacher or kindergarten teacher is communicating to your child. But what is the hal? What is the state of that person? That this is a big concern to have. And then you have parents who have contacted me, Muslim parents, who will say that, I mean, I'm not saying that this is like a epidemic, but just a few who have contacted me and said that my child was growing up and went to Islamic schools, we would go to the masjid, and now he's having problems with gender, right? He's a boy, but he thinks he's a girl, or vice versa, or homosexuality, or all of these kinds of other things. So what is really the cause of those things? We have to look at the spiritual dimension. We have to look at the spiritual dimension as with everything, because the spiritual dimension is the reality. That's the real world. We're in the world of appearances. We can't operate in the world of appearances. We have to look at what is the haqa'iq, where are the realities. And when it comes to how our children turn out, then we have to be very, very concerned about these kinds of influences. Is getting that PhD or even less than that, like is going and making PowerPoints or working in a different service job, is that paycheck really worth it? Or can you downgrade your lifestyle and your cost of living? If you can't, and you're literally like, this is it, like we're at the rock bottom. Okay, khalas, we're not talking about that.
May Allah make it easy.
May Allah make it easy. Like, Allah is Ar-Razaq. He's going to provide for you. But that's for everyone. Yeah. So if you can, obviously we depend on Allah. We have tawakkul on Allah. But you have to tie your camel. You have to make the conscious decisions to protect your family, to protect your children.
And one last thing I'll say is that as you were talking, Daniel, I was also thinking, وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبْ. And whoever has taqwa of Allah, and taqwa includes being like, taqwa has to do with fear and awe, right? Fear of Allah. So fearing Allah, يعني اتق الله في أطفالك, يعني fear Allah with your children, fear Allah in this, because they're an amana from Allah. So and again, so please don't misunderstand, but just one kind of another thing for you to add to your considerations, a list of things that you are keeping in mind. So have taqwa of Allah in your children, in the tarbiyah of your children, and inshallah when you do that, and if you make that difficult decision of, I'm the primary caregiver for my children, I'm not gonna let them be cared for by someone whose hal I don't know, whose spiritual state I don't know, etc., etc., then inshallah, وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبْ. Allah will first, Allah will open for you a door, right? Allah will make an opening for you from where you didn't even expect, and provide for you from places that you don't necessarily like foresee in this moment, but it will come. So have tawakkul on Allah. It's like a very, very big point. That's its own, subhanAllah, its own dars. But it's a good reminder. So question number 3. Okay, so let's try to make this quick. But basically, question number 3 is this is from a very interesting person whose perspective is she has a lot of specific questions. So okay, so she says a perfect family work balance is non-existent. One suffers due to the other. It depends on where the working woman's priorities lie. I have been in STEM, right? STEM, the STEM fields, basically, for science, technology, engineering and math. Thank you. All right, so she's been in STEM for 10 years. And I'm a mom of 4. Speaking for myself, I can at least speak for myself. I haven't achieved great things in either, right? So she hasn't achieved great things in being a mom of 4 or also, or in being a STEM like researcher. She has, thank you. Okay, so she says male peers in the PhD and engineering fields have gotten way ahead of me in their careers. Yet, I also wish I could have the patience, will, and wisdom of a mom who's homeschooling her children, for example, but I don't. But she's got 4, or I think 5 questions actually. The first question is lack of intellectual stimulation. If a woman is educated enough, If a woman is educated enough to feel bogged down by the mundane and most unappreciated house chores and is looking for an intellectual challenge, what should she do? So that's question 1. So how would you address that? She has other questions too, but
you're in the best place to address that.
Okay, so my thoughts on that are, so intellectual stimulation. So let's note the wording again. Here she says, if a woman is educated enough, right? So we talked about education and the perils that come with it, right? I'm not saying education is bad wholesale, like everything about it is bad, but just be careful because sometimes that can become a hindrance. Like you're so educated and you have so many certificates and degrees that now certain things feel you're bogged down by certain things. She's bogged down by the most menial and the most like tedious of chores, and she also says the most unappreciated housework. So there's a few points here. One is appreciation. Your husband is it's basically, we all need appreciation. Men need appreciation for what they do, and women need appreciation for what they do. That's natural. We all have that feeling of wanting to be appreciated. So it's good for husbands and fathers to appreciate their women folk, basically. Appreciate your wife. Thank her for the little things that she does because she wants to take care of the home. She wants to take care of the family, for mothering the children, for cooking a great dinner, for cleaning the house really well, or whatever, right? Whatever she did, because I sympathize with that, and we all need that. So it's not like bad to want to feel appreciated. And her problem here in number 1 is I'm too bogged down in this menial tasks, and that because she literally says the word unappreciated. So do you think that husbands have like some role to play here? It's a minor point, but I think it's important, right? For husbands to appreciate their wives and what they do. Yes.
What does the script say here? Yes.
Yes.
No.
Done.
It's definitely important, like appreciation. And I mean, this is a bigger point that it's not enough for the Muslim man. Like, let's say you are married or you want to get married. Don't think that you can just go and you want to make demands and say that, oh, my wife will never work, and if you're working, I don't want you to work anymore. And you can have, or sometimes you should have that kind of approach, but you have to provide more than that. You have to provide a way to facilitate that. And as a man, you're the husband, right? So you want to be tough and you want to be macho. Okay, prove it. Show that you can facilitate her not going to work. Part of it is the financial aspect. You're going to take care of that aspect, but part of it is emotional. Part of it is psychological, because like I said, there is a lot of deprogramming that needs to happen. So are you tactful enough? Are you smart enough? Are you capable enough to deprogram her and basically train her and teach her and show her the value of being at home, being a mother? And are you going to show her that appreciation? Showing appreciation is a big part of that psychological component. Sometimes you have to be the cheerleader. You have to be the one who's giving the pep talk. You're the one who has to say that. You have to want to be the one who is telling her, you are really enriching my life as a husband, and where will we be without you? Where would we be without your work and hard effort raising our children, making sure the house is clean? Okay, just the psychological benefits of having a clean house is you can't even put a value on it, right? Just the value of your presence in the home, the presence psychologically that I'm out working and then I can come home and someone is at home waiting for me. What about the psychological benefit of that? That's something that you can't put a value on. So much about being in a family is psychological. It's emotional. People are wondering, why is depression going up? Why are people turning more to drugs, turning more to suicide, turning more to crime?
We're just addicted to social media.
Addicted, like the dopamine addiction, coping by going to social media, coping by going to TV, Netflix, video games, whatever it may be. These are coping mechanisms because there's something very big missing in your life. And so you have to be able to communicate that to your wife, and you have to show the supportiveness. You have to show the appreciation. You have to show the love. It's extremely important. So this is not just, the burden is not on women, actually. A large portion, arguably the bigger portion of the burden, is on you as the Muslim man, as the husband, or the bachelor who wants to get married, to create the successful environment, because it's going to be a failure if you have this kind of position that you don't want your wife to work, but you are not being supportive, you're not being appreciative, you're kind of very harsh. Okay, because another aspect of being at home, especially in this modern world, I think you're going to touch on it, is the social aspect. Okay, I won't get into the social aspect.
That's next.
But let me talk about how these mundane tasks. I've already mentioned some of the value of these quote-unquote mundane tasks, but I mean, there is a feminist point. It's kind of, I don't want to give any credit to feminists. It's kind of like a partial truth, but it's true that in the house, cooking and cleaning seems insignificant compared to what happens outside of the home, right? But this is a situation that's created by industrial capitalism. The value of all of that value that a person can provide intellectually, in terms of brain power, labor, physical labor, all of that value has been sucked out of the house, and it's being monopolized by these corporations, by this capitalist system where you are a cog in the machine that's just meant to increase profits and increase the GDP, right? So that value that we all have as human beings, in terms of our intellectual and physical power, instead of dedicating that to our families, we are now dedicating that outside of the family. And if you look at historically, prior to the rise of capitalism, prior to the rise of the nation state, most of the aspects of life and living, the human experience, happened in context of the family, because there wasn't anything like a corporation, right? This idea of a corporation. There wasn't this concept of a factory or company that you're going to work for. Rather, most of the businesses were family-owned businesses, right? And if you're working at a business, whether it be like tijara, like trade, or you're working in farming, agriculture, you're working for your family. Right? And in the Muslim world, a lot of places have been like this, even in this generation. Now it's disappearing because of industrialization.
And because of education.
And because of education and people going to the big cities. But your business is the family business, right? And the family business, guess who's intimately a part of the family? Is the mother, right? Is the mother, and she can be a part of that business, and she often will be a big part of that business without violating haya, without being away from her children, without neglecting her children necessarily. No, because it's a family business, right? But even beyond business and where your labor is going, entertainment, okay, is also family based, right? Healthcare, elder care, childcare, education. All of this historically has revolved around the family sphere. Okay, and when I teach this, usually I draw, for Alesna, I draw Venn diagrams, but we're just going to avoid that for now to not mess up the stream. But you have this family sphere, and all of these aspects of human experience, significant things are happening in the family sphere. But then you have this other, and there are some things that are outside of the family sphere, such as like judicial court proceedings and any kind of war or jihad, governmental work. That's outside, right? But it's a very small portion, and it's majority of people are not exclusively in that sphere.
And that
right?
doesn't happen every day.
And that doesn't happen every day.
And, yeah.
But when it comes to the modern world, this modern dystopia, what has happened? All of those things that used to be in the family context have been sucked into this corporate context, corporate state-based context, so the state corporate sphere. And the only thing that's left for the in the home is what? Eating and sleeping, right? That's the only thing that you need to go home for, or that you need to be involved with your family for. In fact, you don't have... you have a lot of children and parents, they don't feel like a family. They live in the same building, the same apartment or the same house. But actually, you don't really need to interact. You're done at the end of the day at 5 or 6 o'clock. You come home, you eat your meal, maybe you watch some TV, and then you go to bed and then repeat it. Right?
And even eating, people don't eat together anymore. People even in America, even in a non-Muslim context, I was reading something about non-Muslim talking about the importance of the family dinner table and how we're losing that as like Americans, like non-Muslim secular people lamenting the loss of the dinner table and that family time, because a lot of bonding used to happen in that time and it's gone. We've lost it to go meals, like just eating out.
It's like these boomers, right? So you'll read these articles from these boomers lamenting the loss of the family dinner, but the situation was messed up a long time before the boomer generation. Like this industrialization, capitalization, that has happened, right? Prior to your generation. So this is like the last vestiges, like the family dinner table. Yeah, they're shocked. Like we're losing the last things that we had. But look, boomer, you had all of this free capitalism, this classical liberalism that you're now advocating is what has created the loss of the dinner table as the last remnants of the kind of life that you've never experienced. You just have this kind of inkling about because of maybe, I don't know, classical movies depicting the past, but you never have lived it. Muslims, on the other hand, as opposed to these non-Muslim westernized boomers, Muslims have experienced this, and our countries and societies are in the process of following the same path, the same classical liberal path that has created the dystopia that we're all collectively suffering from. And I don't mean to I'm not trying to insult or denigrate boomers, but I'm just saying I just find it funny that now you have a problem. Like now you're realizing
now
that
they're realizing the fruits of that movement, and subhanAllah. It's not good. Okay, so question.
I mean, this is what Islam is offering. Islam is offering a completely different model of life that goes very deep into the structure. Okay, these Marxists, feminists want to talk about structural inequality, structural problems. Okay, let's talk about the structure. Let's talk about the structure of society today, the capitalist system, the classical liberal model, or even a communist model, right? Russia in the USSR, I mean, communist China also faced these kinds of problems with the destruction of the family and the atomization of individuals. That's something that is not particular to capitalism. Communism, as long as it's industrialized communism, is the same thing. So you want to talk about structure? Let's talk about structures.
Right. So this actually leads very well into the next question that this sister had, which is lack of social interaction. So the first point she was raising was lack of intellectual stimulation. Second, so to answer that really quickly, I mean, to sum up what Daniel and I have said on this point, you can find intellectual stimulation without leaving your home and without leaving your children as a mother. So you can find intellectual stimulation in hobbies, finding things that are actually your passion. And if you remember back to the question that I had asked Daniel 12 years ago, I hope you find a job that's like your passion, right? We have to divorce those two things from one another, and we just have to help people realize that your job is not your passion. Your job is, as you said so eloquently 12 years ago, your job is for paying the bills. That's your job. Your passion can be something else. So as a woman, you staying home doesn't preclude you from having intellectual stimulation and from having passions and hobbies and things that you love, things that you're doing because out of pure enjoyment and pure joy. If they're halal, if they are permissible things that don't violate the Sharia, there's nothing haram about them. Go for it, right? You can be a mother and be a writer. You want to write? Are you literary? Like you're a literary genius? Like that's intellectual stimulation. Are you a mathematician? You can do things on the side, right? And especially as your children get older and older, then you have more and more time and more opportunities and just more leisure to be able to pursue those things.
But what about the intellectual effort that is required to run a successful household? Right. Even beyond hobbies, like.
Right. Or the intellectual effort of educating children. So we don't all have to homeschool, obviously, but that is an intellectual challenge in and of itself. You figuring out how do I best educate my children? What are the subjects that are most worthy of educating my children in? How am I going to do that? What are the personalities of each of my children? Because every child is different, right? And you're like up, you have this like front and center seat to your children, and as they develop, as they grow, and you're helping shape and mold them, that is all intellectual work. It's not all just changing diapers and wiping noses. That's part of it too, right? And that can be tedious and tiring, but there's other sides to it that are not just purely physical, right? So that's hopefully that helped address that question. Second question is lack of social interaction. If a woman likes to meet with and interact with friends but has no exposure at all, no friends and no family around, what should she do? So you kind of started to answer this question, Daniel, and I think we kind of covered most of it already with, here, I'll put this down. So we kind of covered it with this basically family-centric society that everything kind of is in that family sphere. If you think of the Venn diagram, circle here, circle there, there's some overlap, but there's most things kind of fall in that family sphere of like education. You educate your own children, you take care of your own young, you take care of your own elderly, you take care of your family business, whatever, right? And so friends, like your friends were your extended family and the neighbors and people that were around you. But as you said, Daniel, we live in such an atomized society now, and we live so independently of each other, and that's like pushed as independence and freedom, but it's really isolation. We're so isolated and we're so alone, and people are getting depressed about it. People are getting suicidal from it, right? We have to cope with drugs and pills and all of these things to numb the pain of the loneliness that we're almost everybody's feeling, And I know that, subhanAllah, now we're in these lockdowns and COVID and all these restrictions, so we're even more isolated than we were previously. And so it's just something that we have to keep in mind, and it's not the fault of, I'm staying home because I don't have this paid job outside the home, that's why I'm lonely. No, we're all lonely for the kind of circumstances that we're all going through collectively, but there are other ways that don't pin it on the job thing.
In the COVID lockdown environment, you're going to be more lonely if you work, because you're going to instead of enjoying your family and socializing with them, you're going to be on the laptop working remotely
on Zoom calls
for 8 hours a day, or be on Zoom calls. Is that the kind of socializing that you're pining for?
Yeah.
So now with this kind of lockdown nightmare that is never ending, this is the reality now. So you're going to have to bring different questions or talking points to this issue. Yeah. But I mean, socializing is the other thing that I didn't mention is like the nature of like at the beginning where you're using you have a job in the career, you have a job at home.
Right.
There's intellectual effort that's needed. There's also labor that's needed in both contexts. So they're analogous in that sense of being a job. But it's a very big difference in terms of the bonds that you have with your family, and especially your children as women, the bonds that you have, and men as well, that can't be replaced with a coworker, or they can't be replaced with like a social friend that you have. Like that's something that is deeper on a biological level, on a psychological level, and that kind of love that develops because of the attention. Like your children will literally love you more when they spend more time with you. And it doesn't have to be active play, but just the fact that you are around, like you're in the same room as they are, that in itself has a huge psychological effect. And when it comes to love, right, if you want to know how to really increase the love of your children for you, like what parent doesn't want that? You're going to really be missing that if you are your child is a teenager and is not paying attention to you anymore, right? Then where is that love going to be? You can increase that love, right, by just being present in their lives, and that's something that is another big cost that you're depriving them, and thereby depriving you of the love that would have come if you had developed that. So the nature of the socializing or the work in the family context, especially between a mother and her children, it's sui generis. It's just something that is not comparable or analogous to what you would experience in a job as a wage laborer, or if you want to be editorialize that, the wage slave, right? So I think, but again, the Muslim husband has to be very conscious of this need for socialization, and that can be hard. That can be a challenge.
No, it's not. It's easy, right?
Just talking about personal experience, to a certain extent, like you are working hard as to make ends meet, right? As the husband, you have the stress of the world on your shoulders, thinking about where next month rent is coming from, and then you come home, and then you also have to socialize. And you have to, be communicative and talk about your feelings. And so that is something that can be difficult, and it can create conflict. So you have to be mentally prepared for that. And that's something that you have to, like, there are ways to be strategic about it as well. Because say if you are able to live near family, whether it's your family or whether it's her family, right? As far as her need to socialize, it's better to be around her family to a certain extent, because she gets along with her family, right? Just naturally. So that's something that you can be strategic about. You really have to make the effort as a husband, because this is a need, right? This is a human need that your wife has for socializing. So get it done, figure it out, like be, solution oriented. And she won't necessarily be able to figure out the situation. She needs your help. Maybe she can figure it out, but maybe she won't be able to. You need to be more than willing to help and to support her, and to, if need be, get your hands dirty, and you be the one who is mainly socializing with her, and talking about all the gossip, or halal gossip, of course, all the news of the day. You even though you would prefer not to do that, or
Fix that sentence.
You might not, it might not be ideal for you. You might not be dreaming about having an hour-long conversation about this or that, but you have to sometimes make that sacrifice. That's a part of being a good husband, a good wali. You want to be قوامون على النساء, right? As Allah says in the Quran. Then show it, prove it. Get your hands dirty, get it done.
Yeah. Okay, so next part of the question. I got this. Okay, so number 3, this sister says, lack of opportunity to affect wider social change. What if she is fully capable of positively contributing to society, besides raising her kids, as in doing charity or imparting knowledge? So basically, this is another reason why women find it attractive to work and find they're incentivized to work, is for this opportunity to affect social change. And I think it's a natural human inclination, I think, for most people, to have this desire to positively contribute to society. And this is one of those buzzwords like potential. Oh, don't waste your potential. Another one is, oh, but you're not really contributing to society. You're just going to be a mom. Again, the word just. You're just a mother. You're just a stay-at-home mom. you're not really contributing to the wider society. So this is a reason that this sister lists, like, can I do anything to affect the wider society, just aside from raising my own children? So the first thing I would contest there, or I would kind of push back on a little bit, is you're not just raising your own children. Raising your own children is contributing positively to society, bi'idhnillah, especially if you are raising devout Muslim children who love Allah and who love His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who have love for Quran in their hearts, who are going to embody that, right? كَانَ قُرْآنًا يَمْشِي. This is a description of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was a walking Quran. Imagine if you raised 3 walking Qurans, or something close to that. We're not like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but we want to try to aim to be like him. He's our role model, right? He's our qudwa. So we take him as the qudwa, and we want to raise children that are like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in their manners, in their beauty, in dealing with people, in their adab and akhlaq, and in their integrity, etc., right? So imagine, like, that's not wider social change. That's not a great contribution to society. So I would push back on that you're assuming that, I'm just staying home and I'm not contributing to society. And I literally got that myself. So that one is one I'm familiar with. I've heard that, actually, because you went to Harvard. Oh, you used to work. I worked very part-time for a year or two before I had children. And so when I stopped because I was having my first child, I got this comment like, you went to Harvard and then you're going to quit work and then you're not going to contribute positively to society.
And your job was actually very directly contributing to the ummah. Like, it's like a theoretical contribution to the ummah just because you're like making 6 figures at a tech job. Like, you're contributing to the ummah, inshallah. But you were literally like, as a chaplain at an all women's college, as a Muslim chaplain, giving halaqat and guidance counseling, tajweed lessons to girls at this college. So you're directly contributing to the ummah in that way.
Yeah. But it's not enough. People want you to continue. And if they see you as throwing all that away, you're throwing away your college degree, and what a waste of a Harvard seat. And you're throwing away your ability to benefit the ummah in this wider change, or this wider way, and benefit society. And you're just literally it's almost like they're seeing you like a turtle that kind of pulls itself in and hides in its little thing. That's what it looks like you're doing to some people. And so you have to correct that, push back on that. Do not submit to that assumption. Do not accept it. That's not true. I'm sorry you feel that way, but it's not true. I am contributing to larger society, and I'm affecting, inshallah, positive social change by starting at home. Everything starts at home, and we all recognize that. Even non-Muslims will recognize this and say, the importance of parenting, that's why there's so many parenting self-help books and parenting seminars and this and that, because even non-Muslims recognize the importance of raising good children as a wider benefit to society. You're raising good human beings who will not be psychopaths or criminals or petty thieves or start upheaval in society, right? And as Muslims, we know that better than anybody. Right, the importance of tarbiyah, good children. So
you can just be perfectly selfish about it. Like, we are not supposed, you are not tasked with worrying about the state of the ummah. Okay, yes, you should worry about it, but there are priorities. You first have to worry about yourself, and then your children, and then your immediate family, and then maybe you're thinking about the ummah. But what are you doing for your? Just be very selfish, your akhirah.
You're skipping one. If you're saying, I'm going to worry about the ummah, you're skipping that, right? If you're I like the way that you said that. Worry about yourself. That's the base. That's the basis, right? That's the foundation. Next, children. Your children. That's your responsibility. كلكم راع, right? You are going to be mas'ool. This is right. And then if you really have the extra time and energy and hail, fiki hail, you have energy in you left over, go ahead and worry about the ummah. But people want you to skip one. Just skip over this children's step right here in the middle, jump to this ummah step. Well, take care of yourself.
Husband as well.
And husband,
and wife
yes.
as well. Your family. That's why
Your
I say
family,
your immediate
your
family. You can't skip that. And it's actually a part of worrying about yourself. Because of this kulukum ra'in, you are mas'ool in the sense that you're accountable. So if you are neglecting your family, then you are going to pay the price for that in the akhirah. So actually be a little bit more selfish. Think about your akhirah. And if you are not able to even think about your akhirah, you want something tangible in the dunya to think about, then even in the dunya, don't you want children that are believers, who are going to abide by birr al-walidain, goodness and excellence to parents? Don't you want to be the beneficiary of that, of children who are going to take care of you and love you? You think that's easy? Really? Like, you think that's going to just happen automatically? Like, what are you doing to bring that about? Right? We should not make any kinds of mistakes from the previous generation. I'm not trying to denigrate our elders, but if they made certain mistakes, we have to be better than that, and we have to learn from that, because we don't want to be bit from the same hole twice. And it's not automatic to have loving children who are going to respect you when they're teenagers, who are going to love you and care for you and cherish you as mother, as father, when they're in their teens, their 20s, their 30s, and beyond. So
put in that work.
Yeah, it's an investment. You have to put in the work, and ultimately success is in the hands of Allah. Tawfiq is from Allah, and even the children of Anbiya, right, didn't always turn out the best. Okay, Nuh alayhi salam, his son, Yaqub, his sons. These are examples, right, that we have to keep in mind. It's ultimately in the hands of Allah, but you have to tie your camel. What are you doing to invest in your future? Okay, you can be perfectly selfish about it, and it will still generate the same result in terms of what behavior you should pursue.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so next piece of the question. There are two more. Okay, really quickly. So she says,
Jazakallah khairah for the super chats. Sorry, I'm seeing the super chats, but for the sake of time, I'm not reading them. But we really appreciate that.
Yeah, Jazakumullah khair. I didn't realize. Okay, so maybe I don't know if we can get to questions at the end, but okay, so super quick. Number 4 is lack of financial ease due to husbands' miserliness. She says, I agree that husbands are the primary breadwinners, but some are extremely stingy and tight-fisted and do not provide the fiscal independence that their wives deserve. What then? So what she basically, another reason why women go to work is to escape and bypass their husband financially because he's stingy. So how, that one's obvious. Talk to the brothers again.
I talked
husband can't be stingy, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is something. Bukhl is not something that is a good characteristic of a believer. Like, you shouldn't be tight-fisted, and in fact, you should have. So there's a certain level of nafaqah and maintenance of your family. Like, okay, you're providing for their food, you're providing for their shelter, clothes. You're taking care of that, mashallah. That's great. But you have to go beyond that sometimes and be generous, right? And this is from the characteristics of a believer and someone who is aiming for ihsan. You want to be a muhsin, right? So that is someone who is going to be generous. And it doesn't mean extravagant. It doesn't mean be irresponsible with your money. But yes, you need to spend. And insofar as you're able, you should give those benefits or those perks or those kinds of niceties as the wali. Again, you have a responsibility that contributes. And again, you can be perfectly selfish about it because it ultimately is going to come back to you in the dunya. Because if your wife, like this guy who's being stingy, Allahu A'lam if he's really stingy, or if the wife has unreasonable expectations and has a false perception, because that's also often the case.
I was going to talk about that next.
Okay, you keep that in mind. So, but maybe he actually is stingy, so he's suffering from that because his wife doesn't has this kind of feeling about him. Okay, so he's going to suffer and I guarantee you, if she feels it, his children are going to feel it. Do you want your children to have that kind of attitude and understanding about dad? My dad is stingy. My dad is not going to, open his checkbook. He's not going to open his wallet for us. You don't want your children to think that about you. Like, have some, just in purely dunyawi terms. If you're not going to follow the sunnah, you're not going to follow what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said and did when he's giving gifts. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whenever he had the means, he was giving gifts. Okay, beyond sadaqah. Sadaqah is one thing, but even gifts beyond that. Okay, and the best kind of sadaqah is to your family, as he sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. So you don't want to follow the sunnah, then at least have some self-respect. Have some of this kind of concern for your reputation in the eyes of your wife and the eyes of your children. So then you go to the next point.
Yeah, so I was going to say, though, so you're addressing the brothers, mashallah, very good reminder for the brothers. But now I want to just give a quick reminder to my sisters. This is something that, is obvious, but it, وَذَكِّرْ فَإِنَّ الذِّكْرَ تَنْفَعُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Just a reminder. For sisters, have reasonable expectations of your husband. Your husband, if he's a good man, there's different possibilities. He could be a good believer, a good, mashallah, righteous, upright Muslim man who's doing his absolute best to give you your nafaqah, to provide for you, and to take care of you. And if he's this type of man, he is doing his utmost. He's doing his best for you. He's giving you all he has. Men usually of this nature, who are good men, who are committed to their family, and they're slaves of Allah, and they have taqwa of Allah, they will do, they won't hold back. They give everything that they have. And this is something that with feminism we lose sight of. We ignore that, or we can't see it almost. And it's not like women don't want to see it. It's almost sometimes we're blinded from it. We're blinded from being able to see that men are like, they sacrifice by nature. As you kind of alluded before, Daniel, men have this tendency. It's part of just what it means to be a man. And unless they have some sort of mental issue or psychological issue or personality, disorder, then it will prevent them from acting in this way. But men are,
or disease of the heart,
right? Bukhl and things like that. But generally, a man who's sound, generally in an overall sense, his nature is to give you. He wants to give you. He wants to make you happy. You're his woman. He wants to keep his woman happy, and he wants to keep his children happy and provided for and fed. He won't hold back, right? So you appreciate that. And then, but we live in a time of, as we said before, keeping up with the Joneses. The grass is always greener on the other side. You always want what you can't have. So you, as a sister, my advice to myself and to all of us, inshallah, is to check yourself and to check your perception. Make sure your perception is reality, is actually in line with reality and not unhinged from reality, right? So your husband could be a good man and a generous man who's giving you all he has, but it's what he has is like not what you kind of had hoped he would have. So it's a little bit less than you had anticipated or expected, and you have this self-entitled kind of self-centeredness that you don't realize, and so he just looks like he's stingy when in fact he's giving you all he has. And I'm sorry, it doesn't cut it. It's not what your wildest fantasies and dreams were made of, but this is the reality. We live in the real world, and you have to come back down a little bit, down to earth, and be thankful. Have shukr and have hamd, ihmidillah, have hamd to Allah, thank Allah for what he has given you, and be content, have qana'a and rida, right? So I would suggest that as well, because it could be, but of course this, I'm not even talking about the sister, it's a general point. So any sister can be truly like, seeing reality, and the reality is she just has a very stingy husband, and that's really sad. But that might not be the case. He might be perfectly fine, and you're just, you have a lot of misaligned, priorities and a lot of unreasonable expectations. So watch out for that. All right, last thing, and then I promise we're done. Number 5 is, she says, lack of appreciated work / return on investment / emotional fulfillment. What if a woman wants to feel appreciated for her work that is the result of her capabilities and education in which she invested time and effort? If she doesn't showcase it and restricts herself to the home, she feels wasted. Right? Watch out for the words. She feels wasted. What then? How can a Muslimah feel content in these scenarios by being a homemaker alone? So I've underlined certain words. As you guys can guess by now, I'm sure you're underlining them too in your head. The words return on investment, right? Where you invested of yourself. The words education, we talked about education, capabilities, and then what I really caught my attention here is restricts herself to the home. If she doesn't showcase it, if she doesn't broadcast it, and she just restricts herself to the home, she feels wasted. So it's the idea of restriction. When you're home, you feel as if you're restricting yourself, because you could have done so many other things. You could have done 10 different things that were here on the table, and in fact you're just restricting yourself just to the home. So this goes back to that first question: how can I be a mother and nothing else? This idea of like, I'm being restricted, my potential is being wasted. So you can see how we suffer from that.
Yeah, so you're putting that kind of education, depending on what your education is, put it to your family. Okay, you have all of this value as a human being that Allah has given you. And the question is, how are you going to distribute that, and how are you going to spend that? Are you going to spend it in a...
you reconcile because she talks about the years, the time, and the effort that she spent. It's like a sunk cost, right? You've sunk it into your education. That's a sunk cost. How am I going to justify that? How can I reconcile myself with, I've put in 20 years of my life getting this degree. Now I'm here at home raising children, restricting myself to the home. how do I cope with this? I can't make sense of that logically. I'm going nuts, right?
Yeah, the problem, there's like a larger problem, as we mentioned, that people are being conditioned, and there's like it's not assembly line, but there's like this track that people are put into, that you're going to be a normal person, you have to go and be educated in this way, spend this much time, spend this much money, go get the degree, then go get the job. Like, there's a whole track that's been set for people, and this track hasn't been critiqued. Like, Muslims need to be smart. As believers, we have to be intelligent to analyze a situation, not just follow the pack, right?
Say, yeah, I did well, I'm killing it.
Yeah, especially in cases where the pack is going is contrary to deen, is contrary to the sunnah, it's contrary to everything that we see in our religion. So that's a bigger problem. But okay, look, when it comes to a waste of your time, that's determined by Allah, right? What are you going to be asked in the grave? What are you going to be asked in the akhirah when you're held to account, right? Your degrees aren't going to matter. And again, there are many Muslim women who are extremely intelligent, they're extremely successful, and they didn't compromise on their family. They recognize the value of their children. They recognize the value of their husband and the family context. And they're able to spend time on that and do that adequately for 10 years. And then they pursued, these other interests and these other talents that they had. And there's not a contradiction. They didn't do anything haram, right? So you have to be willing to look beyond the model that's being forced upon you. You have to see beyond it and realize that there's not just one way to live life. There's not one path that everyone has to take. Just because you have a different path or you're considering a different way to live your life, that does not mean that you won't be successful or that you've wasted anything. No, Allah does not waste the good deeds and the good actions of anyone, right? So as long as you have the right intention and you are going into things with eyes open, and are we telling people that they shouldn't be doctors? Like, are we telling Muslim women, are we telling them?
Not at all.
We're not telling you that. We're saying that just understand what you have to give up for that. Or maybe you don't have to give up anything because you're such an exceptional, like you're in the top 1%. Okay. But the vast majority of women and vast majority of human beings cannot balance both. Right? There's a give and a take, and
there's an emotional toll.
There's an emotional toll. There's a psychological toll. There's all of this cost. So you want to pay that price. Okay, just be real about it, because you don't want to regret it. You don't want to have regrets later in life. Yeah. And when we see what women naturally value, especially when they're getting later on in years in life, they testify, even non-Muslims. Why? Because this is something universal that's coming from the feminine nature. They testify that I really regret not having more children. I really regret not spending more time with my children. I really regret not spending more time on my husband in a marriage to make sure that marriage is healthy. And just to wrap up, I want to mention hypergamy. Did you want to mention?
Well, should I mention this first and then you?
Okay, then we'll wrap up with hypergamy.
So this is a really cool book. This is a really cool book that I picked up recently, and it has a funny title, but I love it. So I'm going to read you guys a very quick excerpt, super quick, one paragraph from this book. The book is called The Proper Care and Feeding of Husbands. Yes, you heard that right. The Proper Care and Feeding of Husbands. All right, Meshi?
Like we're animals?
No, nobody said that. This is Dr. Laura Schlesinger, and she is a New York Times best-selling author. She was a radio show host and kind of a psychologist for a long time, and she took women's calls about their marriage and their life and their issues and things like that. So this book is like a summary of her kind of findings and the trends of like the way that women think, etc. So she says, Okay, so she says basically she's listing here a number of calls that were really crazy, where people are like the women are saying things like, oh, do I really need to cook for my husband? I mean, he's an adult, he can come home from work and cook for himself, right? Do I really need to do X, Y, and Z? So she's appalled. Dr. Laura is appalled at these kinds of comments that she's getting, and so she says these calls are not isolated. They reflect truly typical attitudes of the preponderance of women in today's America. Since Gloria Steinem wrote that, quote, women need men like fish need bicycles, end quote. More than a generation of women have foolishly bought that destructive nonsense and have denigrated men, marriage, familial obligation, and motherhood, all to their own detriment. Normal, healthy women yearn to be in love, married, and raising children with the man of their dreams. However, when their own mothers, much less society, tell them that they don't need men to be happy or to raise children, or that their own children don't even need a mother raising them, daycare will do, it's caused many women to lose the incentive and the ability to treat their personal lives in the home with the love, dedication, sacrifice, compassion, and loyalty that will ultimately bring them happiness and a sense of purpose. And so she goes on, but basically, one other thing, at the end of the page, she says, your attitude makes all the difference in the quality of your life, and your understanding of men and what they dearly need will make all the difference in the quality of your marriage. So I just wanted to read that quote to you guys to kind of give you some perspective. So there are a lot of things to consider, like the conditioning that we've all kind of undergone as women from a long time ago. It's not just this year. It's not like in our lifetime. It's previous generations too, of women being raised a certain way, being conditioned by feminist thinking and the feminist mindset to denigrate men, marriage, familial obligations, motherhood, raising children. All of that is dismissed as irrelevant and stupid. Right? It's a waste of your talents. It's a waste of your intelligence. It's a waste of your potential, right? And that is stupid to dedicate yourself to that. You're an idiot to do that, right? That's basically the message, to be very blunt. So we have to fight that, and then we have to fight hypergamy, which, go ahead and define that.
Yeah, so hypergamy is this very innate female, specific to women, feeling that they have, where they're attracted to men who are higher status than they are, who are more wealthy, higher social status, bigger, stronger, more funny. These kinds of things are very attractive to women. And that's not the case with men. Men aren't looking for women who are higher status than them, not necessarily, or bigger than them, or stronger than them. There are other things that are attractive qualities to a man naturally. But with women, hypergamy is this tendency that women have. And this has a big effect on marriage. So when we talk about the costs of women leaving the home and going to a corporate job or a career, and we said that, well, there's not as much time for children, or maybe even no time, you're not dedicating to that. So there's all those kinds of costs, and that destabilizes the family. That's a huge cost. Not having a stable family is a huge human cost that most people, unfortunately, living in this modern dystopia are suffering from, are victims of lack of stable family. But there's also the marital aspect, and when we're talking about marital satisfaction, hypergamy is a big part of it. Right? For men, it's more physical. So if you're married to someone and they, for some reason, gain a lot of weight, like they gain 50% of their weight, then that, for both men and women, but especially for a man, that will affect the attractiveness of his wife to him in his eyes. Similarly, with hypergamy, the attractiveness of how attracted she is to her husband is affected by hypergamy. And hypergamy event is this relative difference in status, right, between the husband, who is supposed to be above, and her, right? And this is something that has been surveyed And there have been so many studies on this, and it's shown that even feminists, even the hardcore feminists, have this kind of innate attitude despite themselves, that they actually, even though they're feminists, they're more attracted to men who are bigger and stronger, have higher status, have more wealth, and so forth. Right? More than they themselves have. So there's no equality in that situation. But their attraction is based on that intuitively. Like, even it's at a subconscious level for most of them, especially if they're feminists, because feminism is constantly telling you to destroy that kind of feeling and that attitude, and is conditioning you away from that into this false consciousness. But this difference is very important for attraction between husband and wife. And the stability of the marriage depends on attraction, right? If you're not attracted to your spouse in a sexual way, then that will affect the quality of your marriage, and you're more likely to fall into divorce, right? If that's not there. So women working, especially in the corporate world, is immediately relevant to this issue. Why? We read online in many of these forums. If you go to feminist forums, like on Reddit, for example, you can read stories for yourself from women who are just posting on these forums online, saying that, I was in my job, my husband works, I work, but I got promoted. I am killing it at my job. I am making more and more money, and I'm being, put into these positions of power and status, leadership. And my husband, he's in the same position he's been in for the past 5 years. And honestly, I can do so much better than him. The guys at my job are driving better cars. They dress better. They're in better shape. And why should I muck around? Why should I slum it up with this guy? Even though this was my husband, I'm thinking of divorcing him.
He doesn't deserve me.
He doesn't deserve me, right? I feel abused that I have to deal with.
He's abusive.
So this is, you can test it out for yourself. Go to these forums, things like Reddit. Okay, go to the feminist forums, and you can find these kinds of stories. It's not even something that's rare. So
it's very common. Women will say the number one thing that women will say about a man like this. I have people like this who in my life who have said, he's just not ambitious. I'm a doctor. He works at a publishing house, or he works at, I don't know, some whatever dead-end job at some company. I'm sorry, I finished my residency now. I'm an actual legit doctor. I don't know what I'm doing with him. He's just not ambitious for me. He's not ambitious enough. I'm more ambitious than him, so I can't see myself. This is not long-term. We're going to have to end this. The marriage ends.
Yeah, even though when they got married, he was in a higher position than she was. But, she went into the corporate world, and sometimes the guy is clueless, and he's the one who's encouraging her and cheerleading her, not realizing that, hey man, she is no longer going to be attracted to you. Now, obviously, this is not in every case, right? This is a tendency, right? This is something subconscious. So this is something that you have Muslim couples where the Muslim wife is in a higher position, making more money than her husband, and it's not a problem for their marriage. Right? That's not what we're talking about, because we're just talking about the temptation. We're talking about or thinking about like this, if you're a wife, are you okay with your husband going to a brothel, right? Or going to a strip club? Why do you jump to that? But think of this analogy, are you okay with your husband going somewhere like that, where he can be tempted, even if he says oh, I'm not going to do anything, right? Just imagine asking a non-Muslim this, right? A non-Muslim, they don't know about lowering the gaze, they don't know about anything like this. They just have this concept of fidelity and not cheating in marriage. Mm-hmm. Are you, as a wife, okay with your non-Muslim husband going to the brothel? Right? And they'll say, no, of course not. But he says he's not going to do anything. You trust him, don't you? And she'll say, yeah, I trust him, but I don't want him to be in that environment. So this is the same thing. If you are a man and you're sending your wife to this situation in the corporate world, or it might not be the corporate world. It might be any kind of these vocations, these professional vocations. This is what you're risking, because she could climb the corporate ladder, and you might be perfectly fine with that. Okay, yeah, there's no problem. She's successful. But you have to understand the underlying psychology. Do you want her to be tempted by that?
Attracted. Find other men more attractive than you. You are less attractive now, and the guy above her in the corporate environment, that her boss, who's a man, he's more attractive than you to your wife. Right.
And
That's
so
a disaster.
then the feminists might say, oh, stop being so insecure. You have so much insecurity. Well, that's the whole brothel example. Like, are you insecure? You're not letting your husband go to the brothel. Are you insecure? No, it's just about human nature, right? It's just about what human nature is and what people find attractive. And it doesn't matter how devoted your husband or your wife is, why do you want to tempt them? Why do you want them to be tempted? And so even amongst Muslim couples, I've heard these examples where they got married, and because of the woman's work, she ended up actually progressing through the corporate ladder. He was laid off in some cases. He actually lost his job, and he's struggling to find work. And now it's caused huge conflict in the marriage. And it's not the man's fault. That's the thing. It's not his fault necessarily. It's not because he's insecure. It's because she is no longer attracted to him. She doesn't have the same kinds of feelings because she feels, look at this bum. Okay, and it's not necessarily.
Spend on him.
I'm having to spend on him.
That
Things
kills
like
the attraction. She doesn't find him attractive anymore. She's like, wants nothing to do with him. He disgusts her.
Again, this is not. I wouldn't go that far. Like, it might be purely subconscious.
I know cases.
Okay, so there are some cases like that, but then other cases, it's like just subconscious. Like, she's not a bad wife where she has those kinds of thoughts consciously, like, oh, I hate this loser, but she might be feeling it. She might be feeling it subconsciously. And if she is like a good Muslimah, okay, just like the good Muslim will not go to the brothel, or the good Muslim will lower his gaze, or the good Muslim husband will be more concerned with taqwa, right, than physical appearance, and he doesn't care if his wife gains 500 pounds, okay, right? So then she also can practice that kind of zuhud and that kind of, right, qana'a. Okay, so these are perfectly analogous. You just have to compare the right things. Sometimes you get this kind of men are dogs dynamic because you're comparing how women are attracted or less attracted to physical appearance versus men. But that's a unanalogous comparison, non-analogous comparison, because women, their primary form of attraction is through status in this concept of hypergamy. So this is another way that women working potentially destabilizes marriage, leads to divorce. And it's also, many studies have been conducted that shows that as women get promoted, they are far more likely to initiate divorce. They're the ones initiating divorce. The husband doesn't necessarily mind, right? Because that's more money. That's less pressure off of him. It's not that he's insecure. She's the one who's initiating the divorce for the reasons that I mentioned. So this is something that's very observed. Whereas as the husband is getting promoted and advancing, that decreases the likelihood of divorce. And he's not the one who's asking for the divorce in those cases either. So these are all things that you have to be very conscious of. If you're a Muslim bachelor and you're trying to get married, be real, understand the reality. So that's why I want to say to the bros. But I'll let you have the last word.
Thank you. So for the sisters, I would just like to wrap up with, if you're a mom, well, first, if you're not married, you gave a bachelor tip. So for the sisters who are not married, looking to get married, you have two options, as that society kind of lays out before you, and they push one, right? That's like more encouraged, which is you have two options. You can get married and start a family, or you can finish education and start your career. the choice is yours, inshallah. But as a Muslimah, as a Muslimah who fears Allah and who knows the kind of reality of things, then you want to make the right choice and be informed about it, inshallah, and prioritize marriage. It is more important. And women, in the end, we are emotional creatures. We are many things, but also we care about emotions, and it hits us deeply, right? And things cut us more deeply in different ways than men. We're not the same as men. We're not trying to compete with them, and we should just like know who we are and just own it, right? So, and what we kind of care about more than other things in life is relationships. We care about relationships, and good quality relationships really truly make us happy. And in reality, the only thing that really makes us happy is the rida of Allah, right? Ridwanillah. This is what we're seeking above and beyond anything else. But in terms of dunyawi things, having solid quality relationships, inshallah, that's what will make you happy. So make sure you prioritize that. Husband, children, just family, right? So be family oriented in the way that feminists do not want you to be. Do not listen to that. It's a trap. Then I would just end with, if you are married and you have children and you're a mother, alhamdulillah, first thank Allah for that ni'mah, alhamdulillah for that. And then second, no one is saying, I don't want you to come away from this talk thinking, oh, okay, I guess Khalid just thinks that we're moms and we have to like never leave the house and never leave our kids, and my kids should be on my face like this, poking my eyeball 24/7, because that's contentment. This is true happiness, right? No, sometimes I get sick of the kids like kicking me accidentally because they're jumping and they're like, I'm home base and they're jumping on me as they're playing tag. No, sometimes I'm like, no, you need to, right? Like Daniel's always talking to me about boundaries. Make sure there's boundaries. The kids can't be jumping on you all the time, and then no wonder you're tired at the end of the day. I get tired. So then take breaks, right? Take breaks. Have your man take over. Have your husband watch the kids, or someone, right? And if you have family, your mother, your in-laws, anyone who can help. And if your husband is understanding and supportive and appreciative, as we've talked about a lot, as you've said to the brothers, then he will not mind, inshallah, every now and then giving you an out, giving you a break. You like leave the kids with a trusted adult who loves them from their family, and you just go to the room, close the door, lock the door where the kids can't find you, and just like relax, do something for you. Go out and get whatever, self-care, something for you. And so don't, because I forgot to mention that as we were talking, and I don't want to like leave it out of the conversation. So I'm not saying be with the kids 24/7. That will drive you nuts for most of us. You need some time alone, you need some time away, and there's nothing wrong with that. So we're not saying like never leave the house, like don't get a job and then also just be home 24/7. There's nothing like that. So just take care of yourself, inshallah, because when you are empty, you have nothing to give to anyone else, to your husband or your children. So take care of you, fill your own cup, and then inshallah you can kind of fill the cups of other people around you who need you. And you're very much needed, and you're very important, and your work is extremely valuable. If it's devalued by feminists and current like modern society, do not listen to that. May Allah make it easy. It's not easy, but may Allah make it easy for all of us, and bless our families and bless our ummah. Ameen ya Rabb. You want to say the final?
Yeah, I mean, Jazakum Allahu khairan for all of the super chats. Sorry that we couldn't get to your questions. Hopefully, if there's any other things that we didn't cover, there will be future posts and articles on MuslimSkeptic.com. If you are interested in these kinds of issues and the way that we kind of break down modernism, feminism, and so forth, I highly encourage you to take courses with us at Alesna Institute, alesna.org. It's in the description. We have courses that we offer on marriage, how to get married, and homeschooling as well. We have a detailed homeschooling curriculum that takes you from A to Z, everything that you need to know, and that's been developed by Khalid. So I encourage you to take advantage of those resources, MuslimSkeptic.com as well as Alesna. And again, we appreciate all the viewers and your super chats. And we really pray to Allah that Allah grants us beautiful spouses and beautiful families and healthy families that will be our joy in the dunya and in the akhirah. Ameen ya Rabb. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.